Israel has been rocked by months of protests over the government's plans to overhaul the judicial system. Josh Drill is one of the leaders of this movement. He says he left his family in the US 9 years ago to enlist in the Israeli military and, quote, contribute to society. Well, he now channels that ambition through social activism. Josh joins us now from outside the Israeli Supreme Court in Jerusalem. Let's start with what message protesters have for the Israeli government tonight, Josh. Just explain.
Masses of pro-democracy protesters are here outside Israel's Supreme Court to send the clear message that the Israeli public supports the Supreme Court and not Netanyahu's extreme government, which seeks to consolidate all power and turn Israel from a democracy to an autocracy.
Despite months of protests like these, it seems the Israeli government isn't listening. So what do you do to counter that?
Well, we do, in fact, Becky, see that the government is listening. When the government tried to pass legislation, not just one law at a time as they're trying right now, in January, when the government went forward with the entire package to pass a law that a simple majority could override the Supreme Court, to remove independent attorney generals from the ministries, we stopped the government. They have the hands in parliament to pass legislation, and they were not able to. And this determination has only increased since January, and we have never been more energized or determined to stop the Israeli government from turning Israel into a dictatorship.
What do you think the likely outcome of this hearing will be, Josh?
I don't know how the Supreme Court will decide. We are not here to tell the Supreme Court what to decide. We are here simply to say, as an institution, we want the Supreme Court to stay independent. We saw just this week, by the way, central ministers in Israel's government say that they will not listen to the Supreme Court's decision if it does not decide how they wish. That is not how democracy works. Sometimes the Supreme Court will decide how you want or how you don't want. But there is a social cohesion aspect of this institution that we accept the Supreme Court. And it's important to understand that these messages were shared and amplified by Prime Minister Netanyahu.
If their action is as you suggest it could be, despite the Supreme Court's decision, and we'll get that, of course, tomorrow, what happens next? What are you and those protesting in their tens of thousands, and let's be quite clear, I mean, the momentum really hasn't dropped for these protests. What do you do next?
So we've been protesting for 9 straight months now. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis every single week, nationwide, from the north to the south, in the major cities of Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Jerusalem. And what we've said from the beginning has in fact not changed. We've said that we will not stop protesting until the judicial overhaul is completely shelved, until this legislation is thrown in the garbage. We understand that Netanyahu and the extreme factions of his government, Minister Bezalel Smotrich and Ben Gvir, racist, fascist ministers who are hell-bent on completing this overhaul of the Supreme Court, there will be hundreds of thousands of protesters in the streets until the government stops.
When you say until the government stops, there are no elections scheduled for at least 3 years. Can you see this current government staying in power, this current coalition government surviving at this point?
I don't know how long this government will stay together. What I can guarantee you is that as long as the government is intact and they attempt to continue advancing this legislation that will infringe on the rights of LGBTQ, will infringe on the rights of Arabs and all minorities, there will be hundreds of thousands of Israelis protesting.
Josh, thank you for joining us. That is the scene in Jerusalem. We are, as Josh described it, 9 months into these protests in Israel.